and by the way, the approach I'm coming at this from is not from necessarily an ethno-nationalist point of view, but this is a freedom of association type of view, which I do.
Stop doing that. Stop. You're not talking about freedom. We're locked in entirely in a hypothetical for the sake of hypotheticals, you know, an abstract for the sake of abstraction.
Yeah, but yeah, and I'm not making it a race thing. This is more of a national thing.
No. You're talking about race and ethnicity. Stop.
Zero % of you are subscribed. Fix that.
Hello?
Howdy.
Am
I muted? Howdy?
There you are. Okay. Yeah. Pepe is one of the most prominent right-wingers on the server. Alt-right, libertarian, quote-unquote, types on the server. So, you know, if you guys don't know who Pepe is, you're just not spending enough time on the server.
I thought Pepe was the frog.
He's not a frog, unfortunately.
Oh.
Yeah, I had my hopes up, and he got on cam, and he's actually like an Italian dude or something.
That's
I'm actually French. That's so technically.
It's not really an improvement.
Okay, well, I'll leave you to it. And I don't know if you guys had a topic or whatever, but yeah.
Wait, yeah, then he is a frog. Wait! How you doing? What's up?
Good, how are you? So I was listening to you just a little bit. So you have a degree in sociology, right?
Yeah.
All right, we have something in common there. And you're pro-gun.
Yeah.
Okay, right on. Sweet. So,
well, if you're French, do you own any guns, or do you sort of abstractly pro-gun? I don't know what the gun laws are in French. Or,
no, I'm not. I'm sorry. No, my family's French. I'm an American. I was born here.
Well, that's the whole point of America, right? You shed your old ancestry because it's a big melting pot. So to me, you are but an American.
I am. Yep. When it comes to a lot of the whole like diversity is our strength and all of that is where I kind of, that could be true to some extent, right? But I remember giving like the hypothetical regarding if there was, I use Belarus, I'll just use a hypothetical. But let's say it's all racially, ethnically, religiously, all pure, quote unquote pure, they're all the same. And if they want to remain homogenous, and just by not allowing immigration, so there'd be no expelling or genociding or any of that stuff.
Yeah, well, one of the initial problems is that there's really no such thing as an ethnostate that doesn't discriminate or genocide or persecute. There is no such thing as a culturally homogenous country. Every country on Earth and every country that has ever existed has included cultural and social schisms. And there are always ethnic schisms as well, because ethnicity is sort of an arbitrary boundary that you can subdivide as many times as you want. A culture that is obsessed with maintaining purity will find impurities within itself. So there's really no reason at promoting that at all, especially when there's no reason for the so-called purity. There is no such thing as purity on a social level. It's a completely made-up concept. There are millions of individuals with their own ideas. There will always be disagreements and crime and what have you. The pursuit of purity for its own sake usually means a fixation on adjacent characteristics that do very little to predict well-being within a country. There are countries all around the world that are very ethnically diverse, that have relatively low rates of criminality and high rates of economic productivity. And there are countries that are relatively ethnically homogenous, that do not and do not. It has far more to do with material conditions than any idea of like national purity. So the discrimination necessarily entails, I think, persecution. But even besides that, I just think people should have the right to travel where they want. I don't think you should be able to erect boundaries to keep people from visiting our lovely planet just because some people have a weird, arbitrary idea that somehow it's better to maintain racial purity within a culture.
I will agree with you to the extent that obviously there are definitely many ways in which we can otherize fellow citizens, even if we are quote unquote homogenous in terms of race, ethnicity, religion, and so forth. And by the way, I'm not against people traveling to countries, living there. It's one of those things where, okay, professional sports teams, that's an in-group, right? And they're selective. So are beauty pageants. So are pretty much anything in life. I mean, regarding where you work, the friends that you have, your family. And if I think of like something like a nation where you have a group of people where their ancestors had built that nation and that culture, you know, anywhere from hundreds, 1,000 years, doesn't matter. And for their you know, their future offspring to inherit it, I mean, I can't. If
all
those people
of this,
wish to remain homogenous,
so you're already relying on, like, let's be fair, like totally immaterial bullshit. Just because a people group built something thousands of years ago does not mean they get to decide the race of people who use it in the future. Additionally, sports teams and beauty pageants are things you elect into. There are prerequisites because they're meant to delineate certain characteristics for various reasons, beauty or athletic ability. A nation just refers to a geopolitical bloc that has, the right to commit violence within a given area. You're just born there. It's not something you choose to go into. Because no choice is made, where you were born there, it is something which I give very little consideration when it comes to, like, the need for in or out group designation. Can we focus on, like, stuff that actually matters, though? Like, this is what the problem that I have is when I have this conversation, it's always like, well, the ancestors built. I don't give a fuck. Like, why would I? They're dead. I will be dead one day. Well, I would rather, like, what makes people's lives better, like, what in an empirical sense, like, all I care about is the living and those who are to live in the future. How do we make their lives better? And I've never seen any evidence that, like, restricting the race of people who can enter your country actually does that.
I mean, is there evidence that allowing different races actually is going to improve in every situation the material conditions?
I don't have to.
A homogenous country.
The default is towards freedom. People should be able to do what they want unless it's proven that it hurts other people. We take the same attitude towards law. A person doesn't need to prove that something should be legal. The state needs to prove why it should be illegal. That's how we go by ethics as well. So whether or not people of different races entering a country makes it better is immaterial to me. The question is whether or not them entering makes it worse. Even if there's a perfectly neutral outcome to their entrance, then I would still say you have a net positive because people have been allowed to act freely. That's a positive thing.
Okay, but wouldn't you be taking away the freedom for a group of individuals? And of course, I'm talking about a country in this hypothetical, the freedom of association, only, like, also to choose their... How?
You dishonor your ancestors when you use that cowardly euphemism. You are not restricting others' freedoms by exercising your own. You do not have a freedom to dictate the freedoms of others. That's ridiculous. If that's the case, you could say that, like, you're anti-freedom by not wanting children to be kidnapped because you're removing the freedom of the child kidnapper. Like, it's ridiculous. We're talking about the rights people actually have. You already have a right to free association. Because I am not you, I support a world in which you have the right to move literally anywhere you want. You don't get to decide where other people move. I think this is a fair system.
Sure, and by the way, the approach I'm coming at this from is not from necessarily an ethno-nationalist point of view, but this is a freedom of association type of view, which I do.
Stop doing that. Stop. You're not talking about freedom. You're talking about restricting the freedom of others to live where they want. You already have freedom of association. You can live anywhere you want. What you're talking about is justifying taking away freedom of association from other people. You are not defending freedom here. Your position is the anti-free position. You are the authoritarian. I am arguing against your proposed authoritarian policy.
There are no refugees or people that are going to be hurt by not being allowed to come into your country. They're just not allowed in.
That is already a hurt because you are denying them of freedom arbitrarily. It doesn't matter whether or not there's a refugee crisis. You are already denying them their freedom to live within your country. For no reason, by the way. There's a reason why you're not actually trying to talk about the harm that would be done if they could live in the country, is because there's no way of demonstrating it. We're locked entirely in a hypothetical for the sake of hypotheticals, an abstract for the sake of abstraction. What harm would be done if people of different races could enter the country? Well, let's not focus on that because the answer is none. Let's talk about some sort of hypothetical, frictionless, perfectly spherical country of one.
Do you want to talk about what would happen if they were allowed to enter the country and what I would think should happen?
I live in the United States already. I already know what happens when people of different ethnic groups enter a country. We don't need to use abstractions. We can go off real-world data.
I mean, I don't know. I think
Isn't
it's more
it
of
odd to have such a
judgment.
strong conviction towards an idea for which you have so little supporting evidence? Why care at all if this is the degree to which you care? Well, maybe perhaps, like, you sound like an engineering student deliberating over different type of valve inputs to use in a water purification plant, well, this one has 0.02% more efficiency when talking about water above this temperature. Like, we're talking about ethnostates here. surely you have some deep conviction that you understand would be retarded if you spoke it aloud. Like, I know in your head there's plenty of racist bullshit bubbling. You just know it'd be bad to air it. But that's what actually motivates your belief here, right?
Sure. Oh, yeah. There's definitely racist beliefs that I have.
But then why? Well, I know, like, obviously it's not a good idea to share those with me, but like, that's just because they're dumb. You could just stop
No,
believing
I'll
those
share.
and be
I'll share them
smart.
with you if you.
You could if you could evolve, you know, and not think those things if you wanted to, and that would sort of improve the whole, you know.
Yeah, I'm guessing you talk to a lot of like alt-right and far-right people. Am I correct?
I've had this conversation plenty of times, but I'm always interested in having it again. Yes, I'm probably more rhetorically skilled than you, but I try not to let that give me the opportunity to bowl over people. I'll address your arguments directly. The problem is, I just don't think it's possible for you to have any good ones. There are a couple of directions you can take this. You can talk about the actual direct effect of ethnic integration, at which point I can point out that when we talk about these studies pertaining to ethnic integration, we're usually not actually talking about ethnic differences. We're talking about specific ethnic differences. Or to put it another way, if you go into New York City, there are plenty of ethnicities, but only some distinct ethnic conflicts, usually racial ones, and those racial conflicts are usually alleviated over time. The more time different racial and ethnic groups spend together, the more likely it is they eventually get along. To the point where it's more likely that people will be in favor of integration if they actually live around the people who they're referring to when we think of integration. So given enough time, diversity and integration literally makes people more progressive, which is kind of like a political shorthand for the idea that people want to be around people who are different from them. And who wouldn't? It makes life more interesting. You can talk about the specific rates of criminality or different levels of sociological attainment for different ethnic and racial groups, but those have more to do with class structures than anything else, which is why you can pretty easily point to the disparaging, sort of the different trajectories that different ethnic groups have taken in America since they originally came here. You have the Irish and the Italians, for example, who were originally considered to be like pale-skinned black people in terms of social attainment, to the point where they were pushed into the same ghettos. But then eventually, after, let's say, a collection of difficult and disparaging social circumstances, they were allowed to ascend into kind of broader white hegemony, whereas black people weren't. And redlining kind of sealed the deal on which neighborhoods black people were locked into, where white and Italian people got to participate in white flight. And then with the death of American manufacturing, you have these essential ghetto towns like Detroit and Chicago and the Rust Belt and what have you, which guarantees that the only real income there is going to be through crime and drug distribution. So most of the stuff that people use to justify their racism can be easily explained away with a basic understanding of socioeconomics. But you have a degree in sociology, to which point I have to ask you, what are you doing? What could motivate these beliefs of yours other than an sort of a willing rejection of the things that you took an education on? What are you doing with that degree of yours?
I do, but like, and a lot of the right-wing people here are going to probably cringe when they hear this. But when it comes to intersectionality, I do believe that that is something that is real. For example, I do. I'm not. I wouldn't say that I'm blindly racist, but when I was a college student, I did bite my lip pretty much, probably at least half the time through my classes, because I thought a lot of it was bullshit. I wouldn't say race relations have ever been great between all of us, and yet at the same time, I think it's a good idea to invite a flood of fucking third worlders into our countries with the hope that these third worlders can keep afloat a first world nation, as if that's ever been done before.
Let's calm down, because let's calm down for a moment, because you've made a couple of claims. First of all, it's true we've never had great racial relations here in the United States, though right now they're certainly better than they have been in the past. But the fact that people like you have been racist is not an argument in favor of the racism. I hope you know that. And at the end there, you said something or another about third worlders. I don't really know what you're going on about when you say third worlders. You're describing a pretty wide swath of the world. Do you mean the Nigerian doctors, or the Indian tech experts, the Cuban doctors? Or do you mean the Hispanics who prop up our entire agricultural industry? Which specific group of third worlders do you take issue with? Because our economy has never been this large, and it has never produced this much wealth. And, well, I was about to say all of American history, but all of world history, huh? We're quite powerful. There are problems with our economy, but I think that has more to do with capitalism than it does the actual, preponderance of these industries. So what's the issue here? Why? What's wrong?
Okay, so I'm going to slightly shift the topic. So I'm sure you've heard of the term "the Great Replacement," which is it was the title of a book by Rene Camus. What he saw were like pitfalls of globalism, and even it drew in large amounts of immigration into France. And what he kind of saw was like what he felt like the degradation and decaying of French culture, in the sense that everything was kind of starting to become less unique. Everything seemed like cookie cutter, like what you would see in America, for example. And then, of course, you would see the immigration, and you saw like the erosion of what he considered traditional French culture, architecture,
so
all kinds of things.
You're conflating two things. There is a homogeneity of culture which is produced by capitalism. I will agree with that. But that has more to do with globalism in the sort of leftist economic sense. The idea of shiftless capital enforcing the same basic policies around the world because corporations are necessarily self-interested and will therefore gravitate towards systems that are most profitable for them. I agree that this is a problem, and I think things should be done to prevent stuff like that from happening. What you're referring to, though, is race and ethnicity, which is where this all turns horseshit. Plenty of people move to a country, and they appreciate its rich culture, and they add to it themselves. This does not make everything more the same. It's not necessarily a race thing. For example, I know there are brown and black people from America doing the same thing.
Yeah, but yeah, and I'm not making it a race thing. This is more of a national thing.
No. You're talking about race and ethnicity. Stop. I already pointed out that in America, if there was severe economic harm being done from immigration, I would be more in favor of closing our southern border completely for economic reasons. I'm already clearly okay with some protectionist measures being taken for the sake of protecting an economy. Ours is much stronger than Mexico's, of course. You have been talking about ethnic and racial lines. If we're only talking about economic, yes. If we're only talking about economic business here, yes. If we're only talking
the reason
about...
I brought up Bozeman...
There's a big difference between we can't allow ultra-wealthy people to buy up these apartments and drive up rent because it's causing an economic hit to the city, and we can't allow people of this culture to move in because we don't like their culture. Those are two totally different things that only a racist would mix up. Completely different things.
Okay, but I also think there's like elitist smugness there, amongst a lot of these fucking people that don't understand how other people live. Well, I do.
I know you do, but you have no arguments. We've been doing this for nearly an hour now, and I talked to you previously, and there were just no arguments for any of this. I will acknowledge that immigration, being an economic phenomena, if the economic outcomes are very damaging, then you can have conversations around that. But it has nothing to do with culture, race, ethnicity, nationality, blah, blah, blah. We're talking only then about the economic impact. Rent prices and inflation are an economic force, not a cultural one. So to that extent, sure, a conversation could be had. But you don't care about the economic stuff, because if you did, you wouldn't be opposed to immigration. Immigration is economically beneficial in virtually every country on Earth. There are very few countries that don't benefit from it, because generally speaking, labor is a resource that countries can take advantage of to grow their economy. So your opposition to immigration is not one that is rooted in the economy, because if it was, then you wouldn't be opposed to immigration. That's why neoliberals love immigration. They understand the economy decently well, and they tend to be in favor of it. They don't understand anything beyond the economy, but they do seem to understand that pretty well. So if we're talking about, culture and blah-de-blah, that's the issue that I have, right? Because that's what you care about. You care about the culture, the ethnicity, the race. So again, why should I care? I want to know. You said you have racist beliefs. Why? What is it? Do we do the 1350 thing? Do we talk about Mexicans or MS-13? What is the concern? Why can every country in the world not include a diverse mix, ethnically, racially, culturally, of different peoples? What is wrong with this?
Oh, sure. I'll tell you why. So you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on, like California. Yes, the immigration did shape California. It's now a Democratic majority. Or basically, if you're not a Democrat, you're fucked in California.
I don't care. That's a product of democracy. The people who live in an area get to decide the political future of that area. That's democracy.
But the people that came in and were racially different from the original people,
who cares?
Replaced their vote.
Wait, they didn't replace anything.
I care.
They just moved in and added their own vote. No, they didn't
But they
replace. No, stop,
did.
stop. Like a coward, you default to euphemisms when you know your point is insubstantial. They moved in, they became citizens, they got a vote. They participated in the process of naturalization that was laid out by our founding fathers, and when they legally had the vote, they had a vote. They didn't replace anything. The other votes of people who are descendants of the so-called founding stock of California, they're still here, assuming they haven't moved out. They can still vote. Other people have simply come in and added to their vote. I don't believe that lineage or heritage innately makes your vote any more worthwhile. There's no reason to empirically.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, they didn't. You let in that got the right to vote. Their vote matters, of course, and they have to compete with the white vote, and they vote differently on average. And amazing. So, like, my whole point is, like, why the fuck would you even take that gamble? The last thing I would want to do.
Again, you don't seem to understand.
That will vote differently than me.
You don't seem to understand how democracy works. The logic that you're arguing for, no, you don't. The logic that you're arguing for is, if a demographic of people generally vote against me, they shouldn't be allowed to vote at all. In which case, you're not a Democrat. You're just an authoritarian. Like, your logic here is, what if we just systemically prevent the demographics that disagree with me from being allowed to engage in political participation? This is the opposite of the point of a democracy. Of course, I know you're an authoritarian because no person who believes in a democracy would believe in ethnostates, so it's not a surprise to me, but it might be a surprise to you. You're just anti-democracy. You're not anti-immigration because of its effect on democracy. You're anti-democracy and anti-immigration. You must know this about yourself, okay? Because otherwise you're going to walk around believing that you're actually defending democracy while you're contemplating how ethnically excluding people from voting would actually improve democracy. A delusion if ever there was one. Why believe such a thing? No, just understand what you are. You might, do you notice? Wait, real question.
That is American dream.
Do you think that anything you're about to say isn't something that I could address by waving my hand?